Hey, what's going on, y'all? It is yours truly once again. In regards to nice guys, as of now, if you look at society, most nice guys never reach their full potential. I decided to use the Airbus A380 as an example. I like to do things from an inverted perspective. And I think that a lot of things that we've seen with the Airbus A380 actually relates to nice guys. You'll see what I mean. Just stay tuned. Hear me out. I saw a video not that long ago that talked about what if the Airbus A380 was released 50 years ago from the date of this video. And I'll provide a link to that video in the comment section below. But yeah, just keep that in mind. What if the Airbus was released 50 years ago, around the time when the Boeing 747 was released? The thing is, and what the video talked about was, the Airbus just never really lived up to its potential success that it could have had, that it should have had. And in regards to the nice guys, it seems more or less at that same time, about 50 years ago, it was almost a given that you had to be a nice guy. That was considered being a gentleman. You know what I'm saying? Like, it represented true manhood for a man to take care of the woman that's in his life. Depending on if she was his wife or not, or just some gal around the way that he was building something with, per se. Overall, he represented the ideal man. But in this day and age, the so-called nice guy is not popularly accepted. He's the ideal man. But overall in this society, that gets kind of pushed aside. And so you got men out here who have good hearts, have good character, have good integrity, but he never gets to maximize that in regards to bonding with a woman in this society. Just as you look at the A380, it hasn't been maximized in today's society. One thing that this video brought up as well, and I'm trying to keep things not word for word, but at least relatables because of copyright issues per se. But one other thing this video that I got a link to talked about was with the Airbus A380, there were a lot of external factors that affected its success, its potential success. And, that's why we didn't really see the A380 around as it should be. It was a remarkable aircraft, So the same thing with the nice guy, the popular narratives, external factors and influences that affected one's view of nice guys. Now, all of a sudden, it's not really cool for you to be nice. Sometimes you could be too nice. Tupac talked about this. He said, like, yo, when I was nice, they didn't like that. But the minute I became a thug, they loved that. Crazy, right? Today's times. Let's continue on. Now, in regards to the Airbus A380, going back to that again, you'll see me flip-flop quite a bit, per se. But not flipping and flopping, per se. But yeah, going back to the A380, at the time, just based on what I just stated, it was a remarkable piece of technology, a technological marvel. In this particular video that I got a link to, it talked about that as well, how, it was a technological marvel, but yet still unsuccessful. Many airlines did not want the A380, despite the fact that it was everything. It had all the technological features, the newest technologies that would trickle down to other Airbus aircraft. It had everything that one could want in an aircraft, given its size and its capability and its potential, and as well as it being an alternative to the Boeing 747. Now, getting back over to the nice guy in the same vein, he represented everything a woman needs, but not what they want, unfortunately. In this day and age, that's what it's like. A nice guy has everything a woman needs. As far as him being a provider, as far as him showing love, as far as him being nice, as far as him being a gentleman, as far as him having himself together, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and financially. But even with all that said, He may not be perfect in all those areas, but he's definitely diligent about all these things. He's nevertheless the man that can, yo, baby, if you need something, hit me up. And he got you like that. But that's not what they want. And like with the A380, it wasn't what the airlines want. And in regards to the nice guy, he's not what a lot of this popular society wants, unfortunately. One other thing I saw in that video, what it talked about was, with the aircraft of the Airbus A380, given the aircraft that it was, per se, and is, in many ways, the Airbus A380 was too late to the party. It showed up 50 years after the Boeing 747 started flying. It showed up 50 years later. So in hindsight, or in a similar vein with the nice guy, 50 years later, you see a man trying to show chivalry in a society that sees chivalry dying. You know what I'm saying? It's dying. 50 years later, man can't open up the door without someone looking at him a certain way. I just saw a meme on Instagram, and it was actually on Cardi B's page, and it was basically a video meme saying, well, I tried to open the door for a girl and she just looked at me back saying, as you supposed to. That's crazy, right? But that's basically, in a nutshell, the world of the nice guy. People expect for you to do nice. They don't appreciate your niceness. So, all this in a society that's dying. 50 years later, no one's appreciating your niceness. So with the Airbus A380 being what it is, it got introduced to the market 50 years later. People just not really paying attention to it, as far as its capabilities and what it could do. People not paying attention to it. So, you think about that aspect about the Airbus A380. It wasn't just that it showed up too late given the timeline. In many ways, I personally think that the Airbus A380 is ahead of its time. It still has a lot of technologies that people are catching up with, as well as its utilization. That's why we did not see the Airbus A380 maximized. Hopefully, things will change in the future and the Airbus A380 could come back once more in some way, shape, or form. Likewise, with the nice guy, you look at him. In some ways, he had stunted growth. He may have came up in a family that did not truly appreciate him for being the type of man that he is. But also just given his mindset, the way he looks at the world. You know what I'm saying? There could be a lot of that going on. And this is reflective of how with the Airbus A380, it also had stunted growth, meaning that it had hiccups in its production. So that delayed its unveiling, to the world to use. It was, they had a lot of technological hiccups with the Airbus A380. And so that's also what that other video discussed about. But there was kind of something I wanted to shoot off on as far as other aspects of, I think I covered at least, I guess let's keep going. Now let's talk about the Boeing 747, okay? Because it was kind of, at that point, as far as jumbo jets, look no further than the 747. Then you have the Airbus A380 show up. It actually is larger than the Boeing 747, to the point that you can't call the Airbus A380 a jumbo jet. It is classified as a super jumbo jet, okay? So you see the nice guy on the flip side. You see him, for now, in the way you see 50 years pass by, a lot of things have been pretty much introduced, and now you see this juxtaposition per se. You see, you see beta males that have arrived, and you see these bad boys that have arrived. So this has been around, and this is what society has become used to, comfortable with, and have conformed to. So you see the nice guy that tries to show some light in the world of darkness. People not accepting that. They look at that as being weak. Okay, and so given that, you see how society shift. A lot of it was due to Me Too showing up, and then you see these gender wars and feminism popping up. It's very hard to see a gentleman in the midst of that, or even appreciate that, when the genders are against each other for the first place. Okay, you're against the male gender. What's the point of a nice guy in the male gender sector? Not accepted of those things about a nice guy. He's nice to you, sweetie, but you don't like men in general, see? Now, let's talk about the shift. We just talked about the shift in society. It's also reflective of the shift in the aircraft market. A lot of people stopped wanting large aircraft. They prefer smaller aircraft that were more efficient. So a lot of that kind of took away the factor of how successful the Airbus A380 could have been. So all that in a nutshell. Now, obviously, despite all that, there are some people in some companies, some airlines that love the Airbus A380, and they made up the bulk of its sales. One was Emirates, the other was Singapore Airlines. They pretty much were the main ones, the main protagonists of the Airbus A380. And so with that said, this also represents the protagonist you see from a woman's point of view versus a female's point of view, because I make the difference between female and woman. There aren't too many women out here that appreciate nice guys, and you see a majority of these females who would rather do without a nice guy. Whether she's a feminist or whether she's just someone that prefers a beta male or a bad boy. That's what you see right now. Okay, this also brings up in mind, just flip it on this other side again, with the Boeing 787 being the alternative to larger aircraft as well as the Airbus A350. I'll get back to the Airbus A350 here shortly. Now, of course, so this brings up in mind of the fact that, of course, by the time the Airbus A380 was released, Boeing had already moved on from the 747 and was working on the Boeing 787 as far as the shift of the market, and people wanted smaller aircraft. Okay, so Airbus was like, we'll count some of our losses with the Airbus A380. We'll come out with the Airbus A350. And it took them time to work on that, because actually they decided to think that, the market don't really need an airplane like the Boeing 787, but we can at least kind of do something about the Airbus A330, make it more modern. Nobody wanted that. They wanted something similar to a Boeing 787 from Airbus. So Airbus went back to the drawing board, came out with the Airbus A350. And it has done pretty well, and it has made up for some of the losses from the Airbus A380. So flip that again to nice guys. Okay, this is really more or less about a nice guy having to reinvent himself in this society. Okay, one thing don't work, you count your losses from that and you work on other things as far as who you are and what you need to be, especially in this society who kind of sees you as not part of their dating market. Okay, they see you as not part of their dating market. You just do things different. Like with the Airbus, they figured their market no longer was with the Airbus A380. It wasn't about the super jumbo jet market no more. They had to reinvent, and they did, for the newer wide-body twin-engine market. So with that said, nice guys, reinventing yourself for what market? You don't want to get your heart broke. So more than likely, you're like, screw this dating market, okay? So you just reinvent yourself to not be a part of it, but still offer this alternative mindset, love life, lifestyle for real women, not typical females, right? So that's how you need to reinvent yourself. Remain a nice guy, just don't be nice to everybody that don't appreciate you, okay? Now, with that said, Airbus A380 had other variants that they were working on, okay? They had more variants they were working on with the A380, but that never came to fruition. So with that said, flip that back to the nice guys. If society was more acceptable of the fact that nice guys are what women need, and women should want real gentlemen, but unfortunately there ain't many women around that appreciate gentlemen, just more females that reject gentlemen, and they prefer bad boys and beta males. The thing is, if there were more nice guys, obviously this would be a more stable society. But once again, like with the Airbus A380, some things just never come into fruition, and that's where we're at in this society. Now, one thing Airbus didn't do was find other uses for itself with the Airbus A380. Boeing did with the 747 by making sure that it could also be converted into a freighter. So going back to the nice guys, sometimes with nice guys, they don't find other ways to secure themselves when they're on pretty much the dry side as far as being able to attract women per se. You just need to search for other ambitions, but a lot of times nice guys per se don't have other ambitions outside of women. Okay, so the other thing is the Airbus A380, nevertheless, the established ones shall remain around for quite some time. You know what I'm saying? But this also keeps in mind that there are some nice guys that shall remain around to the last of their kind. You know what I'm saying? They haven't quite secured their future per se, but They are the last of their kind. These bad boys, they found a way to secure their future. These beta males have too, by just sucking up and submitting to female nature.